This football club brought in over £600 million last year, one of the largest revenues in the sport. It still lost money. Across English football, clubs took in a record £7 billion in a single recent season, and lost, between them, close to £1 billion anyway. Let that sit for a second, because it breaks the most basic assumption people have about this business. A football club is one of the most watched, most commercially powerful assets on earth. Billions of people care about it. Its matches are broadcast to nearly every country, and around 85% of clubs lose money. Not in a bad year here and there, but year after year, structurally, by design. So the question isn't how a football club makes money. The question is where all of it goes, because the money coming in is enormous, and somehow, almost none of it survives to the bottom of the page. Let's open the ledger and go looking, every pound in and every pound out, because the answer is hiding in the costs nobody puts on a highlight reel. Start with the top line, because it's genuinely staggering. A big club's revenue comes from 3 great rivers. Broadcasting is the biggest by far, the television money for showing the matches. For the Premier League as a whole, this runs to over £3 billion a season, split between the clubs. Then commercial, the shirt sponsors, the stadium naming rights, the kit deals and partnerships, which for the biggest clubs is hundreds of millions a year on its own. And then matchday, the tickets, the hospitality, the food and drink on the day, which across the top division recently passed £1 billion for the first time. Put it together, for a giant club, and you get a number most businesses would kill for. £600 million coming in the door, every year. On the ledger, income side, $600 million. Now the detective work begins. If $600 million comes in and the club still loses money, then somewhere on this page is a set of costs large enough to swallow all of it. Let's find them. The very first one nearly ends the investigation on its own. Wages. This is the single fact that governs everything in football finance, and most fans never see the full size of it. Across the Premier League, total staff costs recently reached £6.4 billion in one season, equivalent to 94% of the entire league's revenue. And it's worse than the average sounds. 14 clubs had staff costs above 100% of their revenue. They spent more on wages alone than they earned from everything combined. Think about what that means for our club. Of that $600 million coming in, $400 million or more can walk straight back out as wages. To players, yes, but also the coaching staff, the medical teams, the scouts, the academy coaches, the hundreds of employees a modern club runs on. £400 million a year on the ledger, gone before the stadium lights are even switched on. Here's the trap inside the wage bill, the thing that makes it so relentless. You can't simply choose to spend less. Football is a competition. Cut wages and you lose your best players. You lose matches. You get relegated. And relegation can halve your revenue overnight. So the pressure is always upward. Every rival who spends more forces you to spend more just to stand still. The wage bill isn't a choice. It's an arms race. You're not allowed to leave. Now the costs. The cameras never show you. Where the club really lives, and almost nobody looks. A football club isn't 11 players on a Saturday. It's a permanent, enormous physical operation that runs every day of the year, match or no match. Start with the thing you're literally looking at, the stadium. That building isn't free to simply exist. A large stadium is an industrial-scale energy consumer, and a single match can burn through 15 to 30,000 kilowatt-hours of electricity. That's enough to power more than a dozen homes for a year, used up in one evening on the floodlights, the screens, the hospitality kitchens, the heating. And that's just match day. The building draws power all week. Then the one surface the entire business depends on, the one fans assume just grows, the pitch. A top-level natural grass pitch is one of the most pampered pieces of grass on the planet. It sits on a built system of drainage and undersoil heating pipes to stop it freezing, and it needs constant specialist care. Mowing, feeding, reseeding, lighting rigs wheeled over it in winter, because the stadium's own shadow stops the grass getting enough sun. Elite clubs spend hundreds of thousands of pounds a year on the grass alone, and often relay the entire pitch more than once a season. The building and the pitch, on the ledger, before anyone walks in. Then matchday itself, which isn't free money, but a huge operation you pay for. Every home game you hire and manage a small army. Hundreds of stewards, security, medical staff, ticketing crews, cleaners, catering workers. You pay for policing. You pay for insurance to cover tens of thousands of people gathered in one place. The matchday that brings the revenue in carries a heavy cost of its own every single time you open the gates. Then insurance across the whole operation, including the players. A squad of elite athletes is, in cold financial terms, a collection of extraordinarily valuable and extraordinarily fragile assets. Clubs carry significant injury cover, and the premiums scale with the value of the player. The more your star is worth, the more it costs just to protect the possibility of him getting hurt. And then the part of the club that spends for years and shows nothing on the scoreboard, the academy. Leagues require top clubs to run youth systems, and they're a serious ongoing cost. Coaches, facilities, education, housing, travel, and medical care for dozens of young players, the overwhelming majority of whom will never play a single minute for the first team. It's a long, expensive bet on talent, paid in full every year, whether it produces a star or not. Add it all up, the stadium and the pitch and the matchday operation and the insurance and the academy and the travel and the endless day-to-day of running a large organization, and you have tens of millions of pounds a year in costs that never appear in a transfer headline, that no fan ever chants about, and that leave the account whether the team wins or loses. On the ledger, but we still haven't found the biggest hidden number of all, because it isn't wages and it isn't the stadium, it's the players themselves, and the strange accounting trick that turns them into a slow-motion cost. When a club buys a player for, say, £100 million, it doesn't put 100 million on that year's books. It spreads the fee across the length of the player's contract, a process called amortization. A £100 million player on a 5-year deal becomes a £20 million cost every year for 5 years, quietly and automatically, whether he plays brilliantly or gets injured in his first game. Now multiply that across a whole squad bought over several years, and you get a colossal, permanent charge sitting on the accounts that most fans have never heard of. Across the Premier League, player amortization has been climbing relentlessly, up another 12% in a season, now more than a third higher than it was just 3 years earlier. It's one of the single biggest reasons clubs post enormous losses, even in years the stadium is full and the shirts are selling. This is the invisible weight that finally tips the whole thing into the red. So let's close the ledger and look at what we found. 600 million came in. Out went 400 million in wages, tens of millions in stadium and matchday, and academy costs the cameras never show, and a vast, silent amortization charge from years of transfers. When the arithmetic is done, for most clubs in most years, the bottom line is red. This isn't a rare disaster. In one recent season, English clubs posted aggregate pre-tax losses of nearly £1 billion. One single club recorded a loss of £262 million, the largest in English football history, in a season where its stadium was full every week. Now the fair side of the ledger. If football clubs are such reliable money losers, why does every billionaire on earth seem to want one? The answer reveals what this asset actually is. You don't buy a football club to earn money from its operations. Almost nobody does. You buy it for 3 other things. First, the asset itself appreciates, even while it loses money every year. The great clubs have sold for hundreds of millions, even billions, far more than their owners paid, because a global club is a scarce, irreplaceable trophy that the richest people and states on earth compete to own. The operating losses are the price of admission. The sale price is the payoff. Second, influence. Owning a famous club buys a level of global attention, access, and soft power that ordinary money simply can't. For a person, a corporation, or a nation, it's one of the most powerful reputation platforms that exists. And third, the thing no spreadsheet can hold. It buys the club. The identity, the history, the tribe, the Saturday, that means everything to millions of people. For a certain kind of owner, that isn't a cost. It's the entire point. So the losses are real, but for the right owner, they were never the failure. They're the membership fee for the most emotional, most visible trophy money can buy. Here's the trap dressed as a triumph, and the reason football is littered with ruined owners. That model only works if you can afford the losses forever and the club's value keeps rising. Buy at the top, overspend to compete, then miss out on the broadcast money through relegation or a failure to qualify for Europe, and the whole machine turns on you. The wages don't fall, the amortization doesn't stop, the stadium still draws its power. More owners have been quietly broken by a football club than the highlight reels will ever show. The ones who bought a dream and couldn't afford the invisible page of costs underneath it. So let's close the ledger for real. 600 million in, 400 million in wages, tens of millions in costs no camera ever films, a silent mountain of amortization. And, for most clubs in most years, a loss at the bottom, carried by an owner who bought the one trophy whose price is paid not once, but every single season, forever. Which leaves the real question, and I genuinely want your answer. If a football club loses money almost every year and only pays off as a trophy for the ultra-wealthy who can absorb the losses, then who is the club actually for? Is modern football still a sport that happens to be a business, or has it quietly become a business that happens to look like a sport? A billionaire's trophy that millions of ordinary fans pay to keep afloat in tickets and shirts and heartbreak. Tell me where you land in the comments, and ask yourself the harder version. If your club is only safe as long as a billionaire keeps choosing to lose money on it, do you really own your club at all?